Hello everyone, this is Zoltar and welcome to another Offworld Trading Company multiplayer game. This time things are a little bit mixed up, a little bit different again from the last game. It is from the same evening, so you'll see many of the same players in the game. But this time, York and I are teamed up on Team 4, up against Primeval Civ and Apollo on Team 1, you and the Captain on Team 2, and then PB Head and Chairman of the Board on Team 3. Now, while York and I spend a large amount of time on this game struggling to find a place to found, let's talk about some things I messed up on. First of all, an apology to York. I never shared resources with him this whole game. I thought I was. I was not. I kind of just left him out in the cold to fend for himself, and that didn't go particularly well. So apparently you don't really want me on your team in a team game. Thankfully, he was very understanding and forgave me for my difficulties, let's say. We still haven't found it yet. This is a bit of a problem. I haven't found anywhere that wasn't already taken where I'm like, man, that's a good spot. I could really take that. Then I find this spot and I'm like, well, that would be okay. And then York founds right next to it, and I'm like, we really don't want to be in the same place there. Thankfully, I do come across this spot of aluminum and iron, and even though I can't found on top of anything, I can actually finally start getting off the ground and use that extra claim to my advantage. So this game was a bit different. I've played a few team games since it, and since there's not a lot going on in the early phase of the game, let's talk about that for a moment. I'm not really sure how I feel about the team aspect. Soren and I going back and forth on this claim. Both of us apparently like to take huge amounts of debt early game. It just is what it is. But teams, it's very interesting because technically you're on a team, but the primary thing you can do is A, you win together, right? So if you two are the only two left, you win. Or if one of you is the only one left, you both win, I guess. Second, though, like the other thing that happens is you can share resources, and that's it. And it seems like a very weak way to link the teams together in a lot of ways. There's no shared stock price. There's no shared stock shares. You know, even when one player buys a player, you can't have the other player also start buying that player and get to the buyout faster, right? It has to be all or nothing on one person from what I've seen. And then that individual person acquires the other company that got bought out. It's very strange to me. I don't know how I'm feeling about it, but it's very early access. I'm not worried about it. I'm sure everything will get kind of smoothed out and get to the point of feeling good, or I may just be wrong and resources are plenty to link the teams together and I'm just unhappy about it. That's entirely a possibility too. Looking at the game, I've done my usual, make sure I secure aluminum, make sure I secure steel, make sure I buy glass play. Bought plenty of glass early in the game, 60 glass, plenty to get through HQ level 2, which gives me plenty of time to start my own glass production later in the game as that becomes necessary. For the moment, obviously I'm going to put a claim on that geothermal. Geothermal, a very valuable power tile, everybody knows it. Getting a goon squad on the geothermal, even better, because when somebody targets you, you get extra stuff. Nothing too surprising there. Most of this game will likely play out in a very similar fashion, but you can see next to all my resources, there's that blue bar. I thought that meant I was sharing resources at that point, like my teammate had turned on the fact that we were sharing resources. No, it meant he was sharing resources with me, but I wasn't sharing resources with him, so I was just stealing stuff from him the whole time. It was real bad. This game, you'll notice I'm not putting any buildings down next to my headquarters that I don't absolutely have to. This is partially because of how I started the game. I started with my steel far away. I started with my aluminum kind of far away. And so I'm just like, fine, we'll just continue with that theme. I'm going to make a rush at teleportation, try and ensure I get it, and turn this into an advantage rather than a disadvantage, because that's what I was forced into at the beginning. I don't want that to be a problem the entire game. Pass on superconductor, fairly clear pass for me, because I've already secured the geothermal. And it's just like, it's worth a little money, maybe if I need to get some solar power up, but not a lot at all. If somebody lets a free patent go by, you know, 2,000 or 3,000, go ahead and take it. Anything other than that, you better have a pretty clear plan for it. Otherwise, that debt's probably not going to be worth it. So, you can kind of see this game. York's doing a very similar thing to what I was doing. He did not find as good of a spot. And that's kind of okay. That's okay. Generally speaking, he wanted to get down, I wanted to get down, I thought about taking that spot, his spot was fine, but most of his problems are probably going to be caused by me. Because I'm stealing from him and just constantly upgrading myself, selling things off to buy research and things of that nature. And that has him fall behind. Not a whole lot of time during this game to look at what other people were doing. I could see that there was a fair amount of glass production up in that top corner, which surprised me a little bit given where HQ was at this game. So instead of going directly into glass, which I certainly thought about, I decided to head off the food market as best as I could. There's even more glass production from you at this point. This means glass is going to be a lot less valuable than normal, and in my opinion, actually increases the value of these water tiles fairly substantially. I just need to manage to scrape together the money to actually buy the glass, and then I'm done, you know. And then that's fine, and that's all set up, and I don't need to worry about it anymore. Man, poor York, though. As you can see, he's still just sharing all his resources with me. I think he turns them on and off a couple of times throughout the game, and I never really notice what's going on with that. And then glass just gets driven up so high, I don't think he can ever expand properly. The carbon shortage was interesting. I don't make good use of it. It was a bit of a risky play to even try and use it at all. Because as you can see, the price dropped dramatically. I'm pretty sure I just tanked a lot of money away. And on top of that, because of how team games work, where resources are shared, but money is not, I was basically just stealing money from York at that point. And suddenly he's locked out. All the resources he has access to are bad. And I've tanked a whole bunch of our money, and he's in a terrible position. The good news during all of these, this comedy of errors, is that I do have food production up. And so hopefully I'll be able to use that to propel me into the game. Let's see. We've got Apollo doing the very, very standard expansive stuff. He has reactors up. That's kind of questionable to me at this point, but it works. And he has steel and glass production. Very, very standard. He has iron tiles. Nothing unique there at all. He found a pretty decent place to settle. I was very surprised, though, that he did not choose to take the high aluminum tile that I end up with. Aluminum's very cheap now, but aluminum can be a bit of a fickle resource. And if too many people avoid it, it can sometimes just outright win you the game. Here we see I finally get enough money together that I can start the teleportation. Already started slant drilling because it's so exceptionally powerful for a scientist. For some reason, PB Head is feeling like he's in a solid position at this point. That's the only reason I can interpret for him starting to purchase his stock and Chairman of the Board's stock. It's questionable to my mind, but not entirely ridiculous.
The black market is online.
But I will say, the captain's already level 5. PB Head's only level 4. So that's why I'm a bit weirded out by the decision to start purchasing his own stock. We can also see the captain has gone for electronics very quickly, which is a bit weird to me, because carbon is still a little on the expensive side. Silicon's still a little on the expensive side. And yes, aluminum's very cheap. But electronics are very, very cheap as well, and he's just going to keep that price down the whole time. So he's going to need to take advantage of that by doing something like getting Offworlds up very quickly. I've tanked the food market fairly solidly. There shouldn't be any surprise there. But I'm hoping that the money I made off of that will be able to propel me through the rest of the game with these patent acquisitions.
I've never seen such elegant use of funding. We'll have
Had
more
all the
facilities
resources for the
open in no
upgrade there.
time.
Shouldn't have been too big a surprise. Glass did take me a little by surprise. I knew it's not as high as I've seen glass go, right? We've seen glass as high as like 250, even
glass
300
market is
before in
online.
some areas. But it didn't go quite as low as I was hoping, so I do go ahead and move into the market here, partially because I've secured slant drilling. So it's easier for me to find a good set of glass to get down on, partially because I'm close to securing teleportation. I'm not going to have to send trucks of resources out to that glass to start the production. At least not for very long.
Scientific colony expanded.
We also see a later game steel play starting here. This is fairly simply because steel actually becomes an extremely valuable resource late in the game, especially if there aren't too many expansives or scavengers on the map. In this case, we see a lot of robotic and scientists in the game, so we can predict that steel's going to be very valuable even into the late game as people try and do things like get off-worlds established.
4,000.
The Pleasure Dome was a pretty good decision given power price this game, although maybe not the best one. I actually get kind of fortunate that that patent lab gets blown up, helps me secure the patents that I really want. It's a very nice thing indeed. I think I try and get to carbon scrubbing again this game. Carbon scrubbing, obviously very strong. In my opinion, the 4th best patent in the game typically, and that's purely because teleportation can, interestingly, kind of cover for carbon scrubbing if carbon is very, very cheap, right? As long as you're not having to actually ship the carbon out there, you can save on a lot of the cost as long as carbon is cheap. But if carbon stays kind of expensive, suddenly carbon scrubbing becomes better and better and better. So that's why I still wouldn't consider quite as high as some people I know do.
Our growth is surpassing my
Another
most
upgrade for no
optimistic
resources. I'm really nervous at this point because I feel like I'm very late to level 5. I know I'm the third player in the game. But I still am feeling kind of awkward about the whole situation, like I didn't get there cleanly or quickly. I'm also a little surprised. It looks like PB Head is having debt problems again. His stock price is very low. He does, however, have a hacker array up that he's likely trying to use to pull himself into the game.
Expansive colony expanded.
And poor York still, he's not sharing with me anymore. If I had shared with him, this game would have gone so much better. As you can see, I am actually lagging fairly significantly at certain parts of this game. That's why some things may end up looking kind of weird, like trying to throw down those reactors there. All of the sounds and the animations being mistimed is purely because I'm lagging. I think I even accidentally scrap an Offworld at one point because of lag. We'll see if I remember that correctly later in the game. So steel has stayed ridiculous, so that play has clearly worked out for us, leaving all of our steel up and even throwing down additional steel, but power's also gotten ridiculous, probably because of the hacker array. So I make kind of a possibly unfortunate call to take additional claims for power. It might have been a much better decision for me to immediately switch away from glass and do something like get solar panels up in those locations rather than spending additional claims, because that comes back to bite me later in the game, where I can't get as much steel up as I would like. I can't transition into chemicals as quickly or easily. So I think that was actually a bit of a mistake, putting down those wind power tiles despite the price of power at this stage in the game. More dynamite on his patent lab. That's what he gets for not goon squatting it as much, though. I think people weren't seeing me as much of a threat at this point because of where everybody else's stock prices were, which can be a bit of a mistake. Stock price can be a very general idea of how well a player is doing in this version of the game, but it's not the end-all be-all. York is about to get bought out, though, so I'm about to be completely on my own. The captain acquires York. I have no teammate. It's entirely my fault. At this point, I'm really working quite hard to try and get Offworlds up. That's my main concern, because I need to find some slight edge somewhere in the game. And being like the second player to Offworlds could certainly be a strong edge, if I can abuse it. Chemicals go a little nuts. I don't have the claims to deal with it because of the early power situation. I'm very late to dealing with the shortage. I'm not taking advantage of all of these as well as I could be, which is unfortunate, but I am still getting something out of it, which seems to be more than what most people are getting. Let's see. At this stage in the game, I'm trying to think back. It's been a few days at this point, so I'm having a little trouble remembering. I do get down that additional chemical lab. I don't know if that was a good idea. It's also possible I should have... at this point, clearly all of my glass production is garbage, right? I should have gotten rid of that in particular, not my reactors. I believe I forgot about my glass production for a while, just up in its corner, because I put it down at a very strange time. And so I thought I just didn't put it down at all. That's definitely a mistake that should be avoided. But it's good for everybody else to know about, because hopefully they won't make it in the future, right? Glass, not even really worth selling at this point. A little bit better to keep around to repair things like Offworlds if necessary, because that will be driving the price of it up a little bit later as more people react to this glass surplus, this natural surplus that's occurring, and remove their glass production. I believe food was the resource off game. It's almost always food or oxygen.
Market is online.
Apollo getting taken out by PB head there. That shouldn't be any real surprise. Apollo's extremely valuable with a level 5 headquarters that's reasonably well set up. That can gain additional off-worlds very, very quickly for PB. At this point in time, from what I remember, most people kind of thought this was a two-man race between the captain and PB.
Your stock is being bought.
And then I was kind of being described as out of it along with everybody else. We'll see if that holds true or not. You guys will find out a little bit later. These solar farms were a very interesting decision. They seem to have worked out very well because even I'm making a large amount of money on power with just the very little bit down that I had. So you have to think that he's making an incredible amount from these power shorts that keep occurring.
Off-world shipment launched. Look at all the
It's kind of a different game. It's harder to keep track of what I'm doing because all of my resources, literally all of my resources, are spread out everywhere.
I hate those
The bright side is that combined with scientific, really means I didn't get punished very hard this game, which was kind of nice. I'm used to having a lot of black market thrown at me because I'm usually playing from kind of a position of power. I usually have a pretty good start and then other people are trying to tear me down. So it was very nice this game to not have that happening, quite frankly. But definitely an advantage of playing scientific. So what are we looking at? The captain holds some of Primeval Civ's stock. He also holds a fair amount of U's stock, is kind of supporting her stock price. He holds a little bit of mine, one piece of mine. I think 3 different people have one piece of my stock, which actually makes me feel pretty good compared to if one person had 3 pieces. That worked out pretty well for me. Everybody saw me kind of defending myself and started buying into me. But that's obviously very nice because all of them still have to pay, at that point, 9 pieces of stock at double price in order to buy me out. So even though I don't have all of it, it's still about as safe as I can be without having all of it, because each player that owns even just a small piece only owns a very small piece and will still have to pay out other players if they wanted to purchase me. So it protects me in that way, even though I don't have all the stock. Pretty clear transition into electronics at this point. It's not a fantastic spot for electronics, but it does at least have the silicon there, and I have carbon scrubbing, so all it needs is that little bit of aluminum, and aluminum's $1, so who cares? I was stealing chemicals from you still. I think that was from earlier when chemicals were an insanely valuable commodity. And at this point, I'm hitting a lot of Control-Shift down, trying to get, I believe, trying to see how much I have and how much I need to get to that PB buyout that I'm aiming for. Obviously, if I'm successful with that, I'm still in a bit of an odd position because I'm giving a lot of money to the captain at that point. He's getting 2 shares of PB at double price. But it's really my only remaining play. I can't go after the captain because that's even worse. He's going to be an even higher price because I don't have any of his stock at all. And PB owns a large amount of his stock, so I'd have to give him even more money than I would have to give the captain in order to acquire PB. So what I'm trying to do, a big thing that I'm focusing on at this point, is trying to find what I can do to hurt both of them. If I can find any way to hurt both of them, that's fantastic. So while they're picking at each other, I can try and slip in there and do some damage in weird places. Obviously an EMP on the captain's reactors is going to be very, very strong. It's going to drive up the price on that oxygen even more, and he won't have access to all of it. But I'm still feeling very nervous because, let's be honest, it's a potentially 10 off-worlds available to Team 2. 4 available to Team 3. And then 1 available to me, or sorry, 2 available to me on Team 4. It's not a good way to be. Thankfully, we can kind of see where some of their problems are coming from. We see that there's a lot of chem labs up, which are, you know, beyond useless at this point and are actually actively losing money if they're active. So all of those are worthless. And a fair amount of them are active and are, you know, chewing through money pretty well. Carbon is still decent. That source of carbon is nice. But what's really important in this game is the play that I'm about to make right here. I'm kind of thinking about it. What we're doing right now is I'm waiting on that shortage to happen. I want to see where it's hitting. So I'm trying to just build up a stockpile of money so that I can commit to wherever that shortage ends up being, right? I see that it is, in fact, there's a surplus on oxygen. I make a really stupid play here, by the way. I'm like, do I have the market power to keep oxygen high and make everyone else kind of freaked out by this oxygen surplus? Can I keep them away from the oxygen by just making that price so high? The answer was no. I didn't have market power to do that. At the end of the day, I probably lose a fairly large amount of money here. But there you are. That was the play that he made. He surplused the oxygen. As soon as that was done, I was expecting a short, by the way. I decided to start steal his hacker array. I get very, very cheap access to the hacker array because I haven't used it yet this game, and I just queue up a couple oxygen shortages.
Black market is online.
I know those are coming. Nobody else knows what I'm trying to short out, and it seems like people didn't quite expect it to be oxygen. They weren't ready for those shortages. By the way, I would like to point out, steel, still super valuable. Steel's still amazing at this point in the game. Steel's almost 200. So every single steel tile I have, if I had it set up correctly, it would be like 179 a second from all of my steel tiles. It ends up a little less than that because I'm not well set up. No diamonds and only 1 triangle for my steel production. But here's a great hit, because I get to hit the captain with that power surge on most of his stuff, and I take away half of PB's mutiny that was on top of the off-world trading market. So that was a very nice hit that I got. And I keep trying to find just those little places where I can get the most out of the black market and try and hit both of them in an awkward way. You can see the oxygen shortage is about to happen. So what I'm doing is I'm driving up that price of oxygen ahead of the shortage. We can see people even sell off their oxygen, seeing that price going up so high. And then the shortage hits. So even if they try to buy back into oxygen at this point, it's going to cost them more because they sold out of all of it, right? They weren't ready for that.
Offworld shipment launch.
We're having some slight lag issues again, like I said. That was continuing throughout the entire game. It was awful. But now this oxygen shortage hits, and if we remember, I started buying oxygen when it was extremely low. Some of the oxygen I got was like sub $100. Most of it before oxygen hit even the $300 point. Over the course of that oxygen short, oxygen hits $500, and I just control-shift down everything. And suddenly, I'm at 600,000. A significant amount of the way to buying up PB. I don't want you, right? U has some value to her, but it's not huge. This Mars Quake is pretty important. I just dump all my money into the most valuable resource, water, that everybody else seems to be having trouble getting a hold of, and drive up that water price, because I know I have secure access to a fair number of water tiles.
Look at all the money.
So I do transition into that water fairly quickly. This, I believe, was the accidental scrap on an Offworld. I'm fairly certain that just happened. Because you see, I'm trying to scrap these electrolysis. I'm clicking on them. I'm clicking the scrap button. It's not working well. And when we scroll over my base again, you will see there is no Offworld market there.
And we screw with you.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. So don't let anybody tell you that lag doesn't matter. Lag's pretty important in this game, as it turns out. Once again, a dynamite hit on a mutinied Offworld, so I can be sure I'm hitting both of them at the same time. Stealing some of that time, PB had control of the Offworld and just blowing up the captain's Offworld. Finally, I have managed to make enough money to buy out PB Head. I'm putting a lot of thought into whether or not I want to, which is an interesting question in the late game, but I needed to be careful based on how much money the captain had access to. Whether or not giving him this would give him a serious boost that he could use against me. Whether or not there was another shortage coming in anytime soon. But given the Mars Quake had just happened, I was hoping that wasn't likely. And I knew that I would have control of the hacker array and extra Offworlds once I took over PB, so I decided it was probably the strongest play.
The black market is online.
Here comes that second oxygen shortage that I actually queued up with the mutinied hacker array earlier. That does hang around, and it will wait until I have access to the hacker array again, and then it will continue from where it left off.
Price manipulation begins shortly.
And that's pretty much how I won this game, was entirely based off of a little bit of control of the hacker array when it was necessary. It might have gone a little bit more easily if I had not lost the Offworld to scrapping it. And yes, spoilers, I did win the game at the end of the day. Hopefully that would be pretty clear from this point, but I can see how some people wouldn't see it. Basically what happened was, I was looking at the captain's funds, and I saw that he just did not have the funds to compete with me through these shortages. I could force these prices up too high for him. I had control of the market. And so I was able to get away with causing all these problems with these random events. And he wasn't able to. You'll see even here with carbon, I buy a ridiculous amount of carbon, right? I spent so much money on that. But look at the price of carbon. And he's not going to be able to compete. He's not going to be able to use this as effectively as I can. We'll just get another control shift down, and I buy out the both of them very easily. That'll do it for this game. This was the last game from that particular evening. I think I have a couple other games recorded that I'll be able to do commentary on. But that was an interesting one for me, partially because it was a team game. It was my first experience with a team game, and I didn't really know for sure how to approach it at first, how teams worked, how they interacted. Turns out I didn't really treat it like a team game at all, and I treated it kind of like a 1v1, but credit has to be given to York. That was a win for both of us, because he propelled me into that position after our poor start that let me actually compete with the major players at the end of the game. That's going to wrap it up for this video. I will be trying to put out a significant amount of Offworld content in the days to come, but we'll just kind of have to see how that goes. For now, thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.